He gave them a home, a name, a life beyond poverty. But behind his back, they sharpened their daggers with poison and lies. 2 wives, one heart full of greed, the other full of hatred. Their plan? To take everything he owned. Their target? The man who once called them family. But what they didn't know was that the man they tried to kill was protected by something greater than them all. Musical note. Drumbeat rises, fade to silence. This is the true African story of betrayal, survival, and divine justice. This is the story of Mzi Boroka. In a quiet village called Mavombai, nestled between hills and streams, lived a wealthy man named Mzi Boroka. He was a respected elder, known for his honesty, generosity, and booming laughter that echoed through the village like a drumbeat. People came from far and wide to seek his advice or ask for help. Boroka was a farmer, a trader, and a man who never boasted of his riches. His land stretched beyond the hills, his granaries overflowed with harvest, and his livestock moved like clouds across the grasslands. Yet, despite all this, Boroka was a humble soul who gave to the poor and treated even the lowliest with dignity. Boroka had no children for many years, and under pressure from elders and family, he eventually took 2 wives, Osha, the first wife, who was quiet and clever, and Zuwina, the second, who was beautiful and ambitious. What Boroka didn't know was that both women carried hearts heavy with envy, not toward each other, but toward him. At first, the household was peaceful. Osha managed the kitchen, and Zuwina oversaw the farm workers. But as time passed and Mzi Boroka's wealth grew, the 2 women began to whisper. They watched how the village respected him, how his name brought favor, and how even chiefs bowed when he arrived. Without him, we'd be owners of this land, Zuwina said one night as they pounded maize together. And of everything in it, Osha replied, her voice low. Including the gold he hides behind that wall. They didn't speak further, but the seed had been planted. It would not take long before it began to sprout into something deadly. One night, Boroka had a strange dream. He saw a snake slithering across his compound, coiling itself around his throat while 2 shadows watched and smiled. He awoke sweating, gasping for breath, with the scent of smoke heavy in his nostrils. He told the village pastor the next morning. The man shook his head solemnly. Be watchful, Boroka. Not all who eat with you wish you life. Boroka began to observe more carefully. He noticed how Osha sometimes stared too long at his walking stick, how Zuwina's smiles never reached her eyes. He prayed every night, asking for guidance, asking for protection. Late one night, Osha and Zuwina sat behind the chicken house, cloaked in the shadows of a waning moon. Their voices were low, their words sharp. If we wait for him to die naturally, we'll grow old and see nothing, Zuwina said, her hands trembling as she clutched her scarf. He locks everything away, land titles, cattle records, gold savings, and he trusts no one. Osha nodded. Then let us help his death come faster. If God won't take him, maybe we can. What began as suggestions soon became conspiracy. They made a silent pact, sealed not by love or family, but by greed and shared ambition. Zuwina volunteered to make the first move. She prepared Mzi Boroka's favorite soup, oxtail seasoned with herbs from the mountains. But this time, she added something bitter and deadly, a powder she'd purchased secretly from a traveling merchant who claimed it could kill without a trace. Boroka took the first spoon, then another, smiling as he praised the flavor. But just as he lifted the third, a sudden gust of wind knocked the bowl to the floor. The clay shattered, and the soup spilled at his feet. He stared at it, then slowly looked up at Zuwina. Her smile faltered. Something in his eyes told her he knew. Or at least, he suspected. That night, Boroka stayed awake, pretending to sleep. At midnight, he heard hushed voices outside his window, Osha and Zuwina again, speaking about a second plan and something stronger. He remained still, breathing evenly, but his heart pounded like a war drum. Betrayal had crawled into his own house, wrapped itself in the cloth of his wife's. He rose before dawn and walked into the forest, tears in his eyes. "Oh God," he whispered, "I have given my heart to vipers. Save me. Save me before they strike again." Baraka traveled to a nearby village to visit Mzikolum, a blind prophet known for his visions. The old man sat under a baobab tree, his milky eyes closed, but his spirit awake. "They wish your breath to stop," Kolum said without needing to be told. "But they forget, God gave it, not man." Baraka knelt before him, desperate. "What do I do, old father?" "Go back home," Kolum said. "But speak little. Watch much. And hide what they seek. Their time will come, and so will God's hand." Chapter 8, Hidden Keys, Hidden Truths. Baraka returned home and hid the keys to all his property documents, gold, and land ownership papers. He buried some under the sacred fig tree in the backfield, and others he gave to his loyal farmhand, Moji, without explaining why. To his wives, he smiled. He laughed. He played the part of the old man slipping into softness. But his eyes never blinked around them. His ears always listened. And the wives, mistaking his silence for weakness, planned something darker still. Usher went to a different herbalist this time, an old woman feared by many, who lived in a hut where owls never blinked. "I want him gone," Usher said. "And I want it to look like sickness." The old woman gave her a flask of dark green liquid. 3 drops in his morning porridge, she whispered. By sunset, his eyes will never open again. But what Usher didn't know was that the woman had seen Baraka in a vision, and had switched the contents with something harmless. Usher returned home, her hands shaking but her face composed. She poured the drops into Baraka's porridge just before the rooster crowed. She watched him eat it. She waited. But Baraka did not fall. He smiled at her as if nothing had changed. Later that night, Usher trembled in her bed. Zuwina asked, "What happened?" "I don't know," Usher whispered. But he looked at me, like he knew. Like something bigger than both of us was protecting him. Indeed, it was. For Baraka, in all his heartbreak, had placed his fate into the hands of the Most High, and heaven was listening. Though Baraka's body remained strong, his heart felt heavy with sorrow. Every smile he gave was a shield hiding his pain. He walked his land in silence, his shadow long and bent. The villagers began to whisper. "Why does Mzi Baraka walk alone?" some asked. "Why do his wives not follow him anymore?" But Baraka remained silent. He trusted no one now, save God and his loyal farmhand, Moji. And the 2 wives. They grew frustrated. Their plans had failed twice. Suspicion burned between them now. Each wondered if the other was sabotaging the mission. One afternoon, Moji entered Baraka's hut quietly. "Baba," he said, kneeling, "I heard something you must know." Baraka leaned forward. Moji told him how he had overheard Usher and Zuwina arguing about failure, poison, and who would get what after Baraka's death. "They want you gone," Moji said, his eyes dark with fear. "But God is not asleep." Baraka placed his hand on the young man's shoulder. "You are my son now," he whispered. "When I am gone, protect what I leave behind. But until then, we watch." The alliance between Usher and Zuwina began to crack. Where once they plotted together, now they glared, each blaming the other for failure. "You didn't mix the powder right," Zuwina hissed. "And you're too cowardly to act yourself," Usher spat back. The kitchen became a battlefield. Meals were burned, chores ignored. The once unified conspiracy was now poisoned with suspicion. Baraka noticed, and quietly smiled. Baraka received a letter from his distant nephew, Jumo, who was studying law in Nairobi. The boy admired his uncle and wrote often. This time, Jumo mentioned visiting during the next moon. I want to record your story. Uncle. Your journey. Your land. It may help me one day protect men like you. Baraka read the letter aloud at dinner. The wives froze. If this nephew came, their plans would have to wait. Or be accelerated. Zuwina made yam stew the next morning, pretending to be cheerful. She added a strange root to it, one she'd heard caused heart failure if chewed wrongly. Baraka sat to eat. But Moji suddenly burst in, pretending to be frantic. Baba! The goats are eating your bean plants again. Baraka stood immediately and left the bowl untouched. Zuwina's hands trembled. Again, her plan had failed, and Moji had ruined it. A local pastor came to visit Baraka that evening. He brought scriptures, blessings, and honey from his farm. As they drank tea, Baraka said softly, "If I die tomorrow, let it be God's will, not man's hand." The pastor nodded, sensing the deeper meaning behind the words. He knelt and prayed for Baraka's household. Inside the kitchen, Osha and Zuwina exchanged uneasy glances as the prayers rose like smoke into the rafters. One night, during a heavy rainstorm, a stranger came knocking. Soaked and barefoot, she introduced herself as Mama Nia, a traveling healer and seer. Baraka invited her in. She sat, shivering, but her eyes glowed with insight. After being fed and dried, she turned to him and whispered, "The snakes in your home have 2 heads." Baraka stiffened. "How do you know?" "I don't," she said. "But God does. And He sends messages through storms." That night, Baraka had a terrifying dream. His entire compound was in flames. Osha and Zuwina danced in the fire, laughing as his land turned to ash. But suddenly, rain poured down from the heavens, and the fire vanished. In the ashes stood Moji, holding a scroll sealed in gold. Baraka awoke in sweat, understanding the message: his legacy would survive, but not through his wives. Baraka called a secret meeting with the village elders. He named Moji as his heir, not his wives, not even his blood relatives. The elders were shocked. "But he is not your son." "He is in heart and in loyalty," Baraka replied. "And he has saved my life more than once." The council agreed and sealed the decision in writing. The news would be made public soon. The wives overheard Moji humming as he cleaned the courtyard. His tune was light, proud. Too proud. They followed him, peeking into the old goat shed, and saw him hiding a sealed envelope behind loose stones in the wall. "What is he hiding?" Zuwina asked. "Maybe proof. Or a will," Osha replied. "Either way, it needs to disappear." Their final plan was now forming, not just to kill Baraka, but to eliminate Moji too. They didn't know, divine judgment was drawing near. Zuwina and Osha stayed up into the early hours, whispering like hyenas in the dark. Their plan was dangerous, but desperation had poisoned their thinking. "We will act on market day," Zuwina said. "No one will suspect. We'll put the herbs in his tea, and take the documents from Moji afterward." Osha nodded. "And if Moji resists?" Zuwina's eyes hardened. "Then he too will sleep forever." Their voices were low, but the winds of fate had ears. Moji had grown suspicious. He often found the wives watching him closely, their eyes like daggers, their words laced with strange politeness. He decided to move the documents again, this time into the church's offering box, beneath a false wooden bottom. Only Pastor Josiah knew. That night, Moji prayed silently. "God, if you saved my father Baraka, please save me too. I feel their breath on my neck." The village buzzed with activity as market day arrived. Baraka, dressed in his long robe and cane in hand, greeted neighbors and traders. At noon, he returned home to rest. Osha brought him tea, her hands steady but her heart racing. Zuwina watched from the doorway, silently counting the seconds. Baraka lifted the cup, looked at Osha, then set it down. "I'm fasting today," he said, standing and walking away. The two women froze. Their final trap had failed. That evening, just as tension choked the air, Baraka's nephew Juma arrived from Nairobi. He had grown into a tall, confident young man with wise eyes. He embraced his uncle warmly, unaware of the shadows behind him. "Uncle," he said, "I've come to write your story, remember?" Baraka smiled. "You've come just in time." The wife stared at Juma, new blood, new threat. But he too was covered by the same unseen hand that protected his uncle. Juma brought out a camera and a notebook. He began interviewing Baraka about his journey, how he built his wealth, how he treated people, and how betrayal had visited his own home. Zuwina stood in the corner, fuming. "Why is he bringing up betrayal?" she whispered. "Maybe he suspects," Osha replied. "We must move quickly." But they didn't know that every word Baraka spoke was sealing their fate. That night, Osha woke from a nightmare screaming. She dreamt of a white owl pecking at her hands as she tried to dig into Baraka's grave. She ran outside, sobbing. Zuwina found her crouched beneath the mango tree. I think God sees us," Osha muttered. Zuwina grabbed her. "Then we move tomorrow. We end this. And after that, we flee." But judgment was already at the door. The next morning, as Moji fed the goats, a rock struck his head from behind. He fell to the ground, bleeding. Two shadows fled through the banana trees. Juma found him and shouted for help. Baraka arrived, trembling with rage. He had suspected many things, but not that they would try to kill a boy who had protected him. The attack changed everything. Baraka's patience had snapped. Baraka called for a village gathering at the chief's courtyard. He summoned elders, the pastor, and even the herbalist who had warned him long ago. There, he told his story. Every detail. Every attempt on his life. Every moment of fear. Gasps and murmurs swept the crowd. People stared at Osha and Zuwina, who stood silently in shame. "I trusted them as wives," Baraka said, "but they turned into vipers under my roof." Pressed by the chief and the pastor, Osha broke down. Her cries echoed through the crowd. "We were blind with greed," she wept. "We thought he would die, and we would live like queens." Zuwina said nothing. Her pride was thicker than truth. But the silence condemned her more than words ever could. The people demanded justice. The chief declared that Osha and Zuwina would face the elders' council and the local court. They were escorted away by guards, their faces covered, their legacy shattered. Baraka looked up at the sky. The sun was rising behind the hills. "God," he whispered, "you never left me. You let me see with clear eyes. And you have judged rightly." Juma placed a gentle hand on his uncle's shoulder. "The world will know your story now." The whole village of Mavambai was in shock. Some couldn't believe that Osha and Zuwina had truly tried to kill the man who had given them everything. Others said they had always sensed darkness in the women's eyes. Mothers warned their daughters. Elders shook their heads in sorrow. Children asked questions no one wanted to answer. But one thing was clear, Baraka had been spared by something greater than luck. A month later, the local magistrate reviewed the testimonies from the council, the pastor, Moji, and even the herbalist. Osha's confession carried the heaviest weight. Both women were sentenced to serve 10 years in prison for attempted murder and conspiracy to defraud. Zuwina screamed in court. Osha wept silently. But no amount of tears could undo what they had tried to destroy. Baraka remained silent through it all. He had cried enough. Now, he only prayed. With the trial over, Baraka returned home to a house that felt emptier, yet lighter. He called Moji and Juma together. "This home will no longer be a place of fear," he said. "We rebuild with truth, with peace, and with honor." The compound was cleaned. The prayer hut was repaired. And for the first time in months, the mango tree bore fruit again. The village elders held a special ceremony in Baraka's honor. They gave him a title, Mzee wa Hekima, the Elder of Wisdom. Songs were sung. Drums were played. Baraka, though tired, smiled as children danced around him. He was no longer just a rich man. He was a symbol of survival, faith, and divine justice. Juma finished his documentary. He titled it, The Man Who Walked with God in His Own House. It included interviews, photographs of the land, and Baraka's full testimony. He submitted it to his university in Nairobi, and it went viral online. Soon, journalists and students traveled to Mavombai to meet the wise elder whose wives tried to kill him, but who forgave and rose again. One day, Baraka received 2 letters. One from Osha. One from Zuwina. Osha begged for forgiveness. I see now how blind I was. If you can find it in your heart, please let me hear from you before I die inside. Zuwina's letter was shorter. Code. You are stronger than I thought. But don't think I will ever beg. Baraka wept after reading Osha's letter. He burned Zuwina's against the advice of some elders. Baraka traveled to the women's prison with Juma and Pastor Josiah. He sat across from Osha, who had grown thin and broken. When their eyes met, she fell to her knees. I'm not here to curse you, Baraka said gently. Only to release you, from my heart. He walked out before she could speak. But as he left, a single mango blossom fell from the prison's garden tree. Baraka gathered young men from the village, including orphans and boys without guidance. With Moji and Juma's help, he started a mentorship farm school called Baraka's House of Wisdom. They learned farming, business, and character. Some called it a miracle. Others called it justice. Baraka just called it, what I should have done long ago. Juma eventually returned to Nairobi to complete his studies. But before he left, he knelt before his uncle and said, I came to tell your story. But I found my own future in the wisdom you live. Baraka blessed him. Go, son of my spirit. Change the world. But never forget the hills that raised you. Tears fell on both sides. With Juma gone, Moji took full responsibility for the farm. He walked taller now, no longer a servant, but a son. Villagers now greeted him with respect. Mothers said, may our sons be like Moji. And Baraka. He watched from his porch, smiling as peace returned to his land. The land that 2 women tried to steal. The land God refused to surrender. One evening, a quiet old woman visited Baraka's home. She introduced herself as Mama Kina, mother of the herbalist who once warned Osha. I came to thank you, she said, sitting with her back straight and her voice low. For what? Baraka asked, surprised. For listening to your soul instead of your anger. Many men would have died in bitterness. You chose peace. Baraka offered her tea, and they sat beneath the mango tree, watching the sun melt into the hills. The warden of the women's prison wrote Baraka a letter. Osha had become a counselor for younger inmates. She taught them reading, prayer, and even farming techniques she learned from Baraka's land. Zuwina, however, had become bitter and isolated. She rarely spoke and refused help from chaplains. Baraka read the letter quietly, then tucked it into his Bible. There are 2 ways to walk through fire, he said. One purifies you. The other burns you. During a particularly dry season, the skies over Mavombai turned grey and angry. Farmers worried. Crops wilted. But Baraka, as always, prayed beneath his fig tree. One night, as he finished a simple prayer for mercy, thunder roared, and rain poured like tears from heaven. The next morning, villagers rushed to his farm. You prayed again, Mzee Baraka, they said. And the heavens answered again. He smiled. I do not control the rain. I only trust the one who does. Years passed. One day, a black car drove up Baraka's dusty path. Juma stepped out in a fine suit, now a lawyer and community advocate. He knelt before Baraka with tears in his eyes. "You made me more than a man," he said. "You made me a believer." Baraka placed his hand on his head. "Then go, and make other men believe." With the help of Juma and Moji, Baraka donated part of his land to build a school, orphan center, and community church. Children danced as construction began. Baraka watched, his walking stick planted beside him like a flag. "They tried to take this land with poison," he said. "But now, this land will give life." And the hills of Mavomba echoed with joy. 10 years passed. Osha was released from prison. She didn't return to Baraka's home, but she sent one final letter. "I was foolish. I destroyed my marriage, my dignity, and my peace. But you gave me something more, grace. I will spend my life giving that grace to others." Baraka smiled gently. "That is enough." News later came that Suwina had passed away in prison, quietly and without any visitors. She had never accepted help, forgiveness, or healing. Baraka stood in silence when he heard. "I tried to show you love," he whispered to the wind. "But even God will not force it on a closed heart." He lit a candle in her memory, then let the smoke rise freely. The old mango tree under which many of Baraka's life moments had taken place grew wider and stronger. Moji carved a sign onto the tree. Here stood a man who was betrayed, but never broken. People from far away came to see the tree. Children sat beneath it to learn. Elders sat beneath it to remember. And Baraka? He just smiled every time he passed by. One morning, knowing his time was near, Baraka called Moji, Juma, the pastor, and a few village elders to his side. He blessed each of them. "To Moji, my loyal son, may your hands never lack harvest. To Juma, may your voice defend the truth. To the village, may your homes remain honest and your hearts clean." Then he whispered, "I was not saved because I was strong. I was saved because I believed." Baraka passed away peacefully in his sleep, under the fig tree where he had once wept and prayed. His funeral was the largest the village had ever seen. People came from towns and cities. Songs were sung. Stories told. On his gravestone were the words, "He was betrayed by flesh, but protected by God. He lost nothing that heaven could not return." And above his resting place, the mango tree continued to bloom.